Depression tells you that nothing will help, that you've tried everything, that you're beyond fixing. And one of the cruelest tricks depression plays is convincing you that the very actions that could help you feel better are pointless, impossible, or not worth the effort. But here's what decades of psychological research has proven: there are specific, concrete actions that genuinely reduce depression symptoms, and they work not because they're motivational platitudes or toxic positivity, but because they target the actual psychological and neurological mechanisms that maintain depression. I'm Sergiu Popovici, and today I'm breaking down 5 research-backed strategies that actually help depression, why they work, and how to implement them, even when your brain is telling you nothing matters. Let's start with the one you've probably heard 1,000 times and are sick of hearing: exercise and physical movement. I know when someone tells a depressed person to just exercise, it feels dismissive, like they don't understand that depression makes even getting out of bed feel impossible. But here's why this recommendation keeps coming up. The research is overwhelming. A landmark randomized trial comparing behavioral activation, cognitive therapy, and antidepressant medication found that among more severely depressed patients, behavioral activation was comparable to antidepressant medication, and physical movement is a core component of behavioral activation. Studies show that exercise is as effective as antidepressants for mild to moderate depression, and it works through multiple mechanisms. It increases neuroplasticity in the brain, releases endorphins and other mood-regulating neurotransmitters, reduces inflammation, which is linked to depression, improves sleep quality, and gives you a sense of accomplishment. But here's the critical part most people miss: you don't need to run marathons or spend hours at the gym. The research shows that even small amounts of movement make a measurable difference: a 10-minute walk, stretching for 5 minutes, dancing to one song in your room. The goal isn't fitness, the goal is activation. And when depression is telling you that moving is pointless, that's actually your signal that movement is exactly what you need, because depression keeps you stuck through inactivity. The second strategy is scheduling one pleasant activity daily, and this comes directly from a therapeutic approach called behavioral activation, which research has shown to be one of the most effective treatments for depression. Here's the insight that makes this work. Depression creates a vicious cycle where you feel bad, so you withdraw from activities. And withdrawing from activities makes you feel worse, which makes you withdraw more, and the cycle deepens. Behavioral activation therapy aims to break the trigger response avoidance pattern and promote the trigger response alternative cope pattern, which helps individuals adopt an alternative adaptive pattern to cope with adverse stimuli. The research shows that you don't need to wait until you feel motivated to do pleasant things. In fact, that's backwards. The motivation comes after you start doing things, not before. This is called behavioral activation, because you're activating behavior before the feelings change. And what's remarkable is that it works even when you don't enjoy the activity at first. The consistent engagement with positive experiences gradually rebuilds your capacity for pleasure and connection. So pick one thing: calling a friend, watching a show you used to enjoy, spending 10 minutes on a hobby, eating a meal you like, and schedule it like a non-negotiable appointment. And when depression tells you it won't help, or you don't deserve it, or there's no point, do it anyway, because that resistance is the depression talking, not reality. The third strategy is challenging one negative thought using cognitive restructuring, which is the cornerstone of cognitive behavioral therapy for depression. Depression doesn't just make you feel bad, it fundamentally distorts how you think. It creates patterns of negative automatic thoughts that reinforce hopelessness, worthlessness, and helplessness. And these thoughts feel completely true, even though they're often exaggerations or outright false. The research shows that learning to identify and challenge these distorted thoughts reduces depression symptoms significantly. And the technique is surprisingly straightforward, even though it takes practice. When you notice a negative thought: "I'm a failure, nothing ever works out, I'll always feel this way," pause and ask yourself, is this thought based on facts or feelings? What evidence supports this thought? What evidence contradicts it? What would I tell a friend who had this thought? And is there a more balanced way to think about this situation? You're not trying to replace negative thoughts with unrealistic positive ones. You're trying to move from distorted thinking to realistic thinking. From "I'm a complete failure" to "I failed at this specific thing," which is painful. But I've succeeded at other things, and failure doesn't define my entire worth. Depression makes you believe its lies, because they feel emotionally true. But feelings aren't facts, and learning to question the thoughts depression generates gives you distance from them and gradually weakens their power over you. The fourth strategy is connecting with one person, and this might be the hardest one when you're depressed, because depression lies and tells you that you're a burden, that nobody wants to hear from you, that isolation is safer than reaching out. But research consistently shows that social connection is one of the most powerful protective factors against depression, and isolation is one of the strongest risk factors that maintains and worsens it. Behavioral activation model components commonly include increasing access to pleasant events, activities, and consequences, and activity scheduling to promote contact with sources of positive reinforcement from the person's environment. And human connection is one of the most important sources of positive reinforcement. You don't need to have deep philosophical conversations or pretend you're fine. Even small connections count, as sending a text to someone you trust, commenting on a friend's social media post, sitting near other people even if you don't talk to them, attending a group activity even if you just observe. The goal is to interrupt the isolation pattern, because when you're alone with depression, depression gets louder and more convincing. But even minimal contact with others reminds you that you're part of the human community and that connection is possible. And here's something important. If you're worried about being a burden, research shows that most people actually want to help and feel good about being trusted with someone's struggles. Your depression is lying when it tells you that reaching out will drive people away. The fifth strategy is maintaining consistent sleep and wake times. And this might sound trivial, but it's actually one of the most powerful interventions for mood regulation. Depression and sleep have a bidirectional relationship. Depression disrupts sleep, and disrupted sleep worsens depression, creating another vicious cycle that keeps you stuck. Your circadian rhythm, the internal biological clock that regulates sleep-wake cycles, directly affects mood regulation, and when your sleep schedule is chaotic, your brain's ability to regulate emotions is significantly impaired. Research shows that going to sleep and waking up at the same time every day, even on weekends, helps stabilize your circadian rhythm, which improves mood, energy, and your brain's ability to respond to depression treatment. This doesn't mean you need to sleep perfectly or get 8 hours every night. It means consistency matters more than perfection. If you go to bed at midnight and wake at 8 every day, that's better for depression than sleeping 10 hours one night and 4 hours the next. And if you're struggling with insomnia, which is common in depression, the same principle applies. Get up at the same time every morning, regardless of how much you slept. Avoid napping during the day, and create a wind-down routine before bed that signals to your brain that sleep is coming. Now, let me address something critical. If you're watching this and thinking, I've tried these things, and they didn't work, I want you to understand that there's a difference between trying something once or sporadically and implementing it consistently as part of a structured approach. Research shows that behavioral activation is one of the best examined methods for treating depression, and it's defined as a psychological method aimed at increasing positive interactions between a person and the environment. And all 5 of these strategies are about creating consistent patterns of behavior that gradually shift your relationship with depression. Depression makes you believe that if something doesn't provide immediate relief, it's not working. But that's not how psychological change happens. These strategies work cumulatively over time, not instantly, and giving up after a few days means you never gave them a real chance to work. It's also worth noting that these strategies work best when combined, not in isolation. Moving your body makes it easier to sleep well. Sleeping well makes it easier to challenge negative thoughts. Challenging negative thoughts makes it easier to connect with others. And all of these together create momentum that depression can't maintain its grip against. And finally, I need to say this clearly. These strategies are evidence-based tools that help most people with depression, but they're not a substitute for professional treatment if you need it. If your depression is severe, if you're having thoughts of self-harm, if you've been struggling for months or years without improvement, please reach out to a mental health professional. Therapy, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy and behavioral activation, has decades of research showing its effectiveness, and medication can be life-saving for many people. These 5 strategies can be part of your treatment plan alongside professional help, or they can be what you implement while you're waiting to access treatment, or they can be how you maintain your progress after treatment ends. Depression is treatable, and the fact that it lies to you and tells you nothing will help doesn't make that lie true. It just makes it harder to take the actions that would prove depression wrong. If this video gave you something actionable, Subscribe to Psychology by Zoyo Papavici and hit the notification bell for more research-backed psychology that cuts through the BS and gives you tools that actually work. Leave a comment below telling me which of these 5 strategies you're going to try first, or share what's worked for you in managing depression. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Thank you for watching, and remember, depression lies, but science doesn't, and taking even one small action against what depression tells you is an act of resistance that matters. I'll see you in the next one.